Hey, this is Sky. Welcome to my YouTube channel. So let's talk a little bit about morality, right and wrong. I've talked about this once before, but I want to do a little bit of a deeper dive. Besides, it's been a while. The last time I talked about morality was about a year ago. Is morality learned, or is it something that we're born with? Is it natural, like this innate sense that we all have, or is it something that is given to us by God, or that we can only realize because of the Bible? Let's try to figure it out. Morality, and my idea, is really just right and wrong. You know, let's just keep it simple. It's not genetic. So there is no place to find morality in your DNA. If we do a blood test, we can't determine if you are a moral person, if you're good or bad, scientifically. I mean, unfortunately, right? If you could just test all babies and say, well, that's a bad one. There goes the next Hitler. That's the next Stalin. No, that one's going to be the next Martin Luther King. Put that one in the right box. I mean, we could easily weed out the terrorists and the school shooters and the supervillains. We could make it such a better place if we could figure this out scientifically. But we can't. But it does feel like that morality is natural. Atheists can be moral. Animals can be moral. But that doesn't mean that they're born with it. There have been studies with little babies. And for the longest time, we've thought that in child development, that babies were little monsters and they had to be taught morality. They had to be taught what's right and wrong. But they're discovering now that there's very, very basic, just raw, instinctual forms of right and wrong, of good and bad, that babies display. And nobody taught them this. So where do they get that from? What they don't talk about in the study is, at what age do we start learning? Do babies start learning the second they get popped out? A common belief that, oh, well, the baby doesn't really know what's going on. This belief is very commonly held in trailer parks. I remember my days of doing hard drugs and going over to people's houses, and we're all doing fucking cocaine on the table, and there's babies, all toddlers, and the parents just say, they won't remember it. They don't know what's going on. At what age do babies start learning, start absorbing their environment, processing it? Because if we could determine that, then we'd be able to determine at what age they start learning and mimicking, behavior. And I think that morality is learned because it's not genetic. And if it's not genetic, we can't be born with it. You can't carry on bad behavior from an ancestor that you don't know. If you find out, and everybody's doing these online ancestry things, what if you found out with your online ancestry that one of your ancestors was a horrible person? Was Stalin. Stalin was terrible. Killed 20 million people. What if you found out you were related to Stalin? Would that make you a bad person too? You'd have to kill yourself just as a sacrifice to everybody else and say, well, Jesus Christ, it looks like I'm probably a bad person. It's not carried on like that. You have to be taught it. Apples don't fall far from the tree. But even still, just because your dad was a bad person doesn't mean you are. You have free will. That's the beauty of life. You can choose to be, I'm not going to be like you. Just because your dad beat you every day as a kid, abused you in some way, doesn't mean you're going to grow up and do it to others. But I do think that morality is learned. Some people think that it's given to us by God. And the theory goes that anybody could be moral, but you don't know morality. Or let me say it the way, you can't justify morality without acknowledging that there's a God. Because this instinctual right and wrong that we all seem to have, that is not scientific, you can't find it in my genes, but I still have this instinct to protect babies and protect women and to do what's right, that instinct is a divine implant by God from a higher power somehow into us, programmed into us by God. That's the theory. The problem is, morality changes over the years, over generations, over time. So if it was given to us by God, if morality was this static thing implanted into us from a list of 10 commandments, then morality would have been the same throughout history. And sure, you can go back to about 18 something or other, 1880, and then what we call morality right now, all of that falls apart. You know, in 1880 is when they established consent laws, age of consent laws, right? Before that, you could go and right across the street to your neighbor's house and just say, give me your daughter. I think she's pretty, I want to marry your daughter, and I don't care if she's 13. And we recoil at that kind of stuff now. Oh, child molestation's pervert. That's terrible. It's immoral. Yeah, fuck no kids. That's terrible. It's immoral. 1880 is when they passed the law. So before that, the large group of most people, almost everybody, believed it was fine. Your mom, your grandma, everybody was just like, yeah. All got married at 14, 13. That was like a common thing. Elvis snatched his wife up, Priscilla Presley, she was like 14. I believe the guy from Aerosmith did the same fucking thing, Steven Tyler. It's fairly recently that people have changed, and I'm not trying to promote this, I know I'm going on about it. I'm just trying to point out that morality changes over time. We can find different examples. Slavery, Jesus Christ, slavery. I don't think there's anybody out there, maybe somebody, some Ku Klux Klan member, but most people, the vast majority of us, strongly believe and feel that slavery is immoral and wrong. It's terrible. Slavery's terrible. We had a war over it, right? It's only been about 150 years since we've all believed that slavery was terrible. In fact, for thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years, since the beginning of time, all the way up until the 1860s, the vast majority of humanity had no problem with slavery. They had no problem with it at all until all of a sudden, when I say all of a sudden, I say that on purpose because if you look at a timeline, it's like everybody loves slavery, and then there's this, all of a sudden this mark at like 1860, 18 something or other, and people decided they didn't like slavery anymore. The British were, within a few years, went from hell yeah, we love slavery to let's police force the Atlantic and shut down the slave trade. That's what the British did. So slavery was a bad thing. It is a bad thing, but it wasn't always. And that's societal. So I think that we could go down the line and look at all kinds of right and wrongs and find points in history where things were different. Alcohol, oddly enough, has been celebrated for thousands of years, and then for some weird reason, it was 1915 was the prohibition, the temperance movement. And these chicks, these weird chicks, they started by these women. They didn't like their husbands going to bars after factory work. They wanted to come home, raise a family. And it was kind of inspired by this sense of morality that there was a degeneracy going on in society, and that it was all caused by alcohol, and we wanted to return to a form of a higher state of moral virtue. A lot of people blamed alcohol. And then it was 1933 or something, the fucking prohibition was over. And people were dancing in the streets, drinking, pouring beer on themselves, like, woohoo! So, I mean, shit changes. I think it's totally learned. The question is, when do you learn it? And that may be how we explain it in babies. I don't know how we explain it in animals. It is interesting when you see kindness from some wild animal, some moral act, what we perceive as a moral act. That animal should have killed me, and instead it helped me. I mean, these are rare. We cherry pick those scenarios, and when we're lucky enough to get them on video, people are just like, oh, that's so great. So I don't know how to explain that. I think it's important to have a sense of right and wrong. However you feel like you got it, whether you're born with it, God gives it to you, or you just invent it on your own. I think it's the meaning of life is to pursue what's good and to know what's wrong and to intentionally not choose the wrong thing, to intentionally not be bad when you could. Every second of every day you could be bad. I used to be a criminal, and I know this. I could be bad. I could be bad right now. Instead, I'm sitting here making a video. It's to choose to be good in everything you do. And when you constantly choose to be good in everything you do, incrementally, you never have to worry about this backsliding. And we've seen moments in history where there's been some major backsliding with morality. It's all just food for thought. Thanks for watching.